Video, we're going to go over 4 different examples that all use the blueprint of moving through every single line in a text file from start to finish. This should give you a good idea of different ways that you can use this blueprint to your advantage. Alright, so in this example, we are going to write a function called LineCount that takes in the name of a file and it outputs the number of lines in the file. So right now I have a file called song.txt that contains the best song in the entire world, which is Bang Bang by Jessie J. And I want to figure out how many lines are there in this file, okay? Right? I could, of course, I'm scrolling here and I see that there's 97, right? I see that there's a line count here, but let's say that I didn't know this and I wanted to create a file or a function that outputted this number for me. And so the first thing we have to do is we have to create our function header. So let's do function. And in this case here, I want to output a count. And so I want to call this LineCount. And this is going to take in a file name. Awesome. So then now that I have this, this function header, I want to go through my blueprint, right? The first thing I want to do is I want to open my file. Then I want to read my lines. Then I want to close my file. Close file, okay? So right now, let's go ahead and open our file. So right now, I'm going to say fh is equal to fopen of my file name, okay? And so now I have the file handle for my file that I've opened with reading permissions. Now I want to read through all of my lines. Okay, and we talked about the blueprint for this is first, you have to get out your first line. So line is, and now I need to use fgetL or fgetS. So now I have to make a decision. Which one is appropriate here? In this case, since I'm counting the entire line, okay, and I'm not counting like individual characters or anything like that, it really doesn't matter if I use fgetL or fgetS, because having the new line character on there or not having it doesn't influence how this function will run. And so in this case here, I'll just use fgetL. So I'll say line is equal to fgetL of file handle. Cool. And now I want to keep on reading out lines. So while is char my line. Okay. I'll go in here. I'll be able to do stuff to my lines. And then once I get out a line, I want to count it and then move on to the next line. So therefore, I'm going to go ahead and just say my line is equal to fgetL of my file handle. All right. I'm really bad with suppressing things. And cool, so that's the blueprint for moving through all the lines. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to close my file. So fclose fh. Awesome. So now we have the blueprint. So now inside of here, I want to do stuff to my lines. And the do stuff here is I want to count my number of lines. So I want to increment a counter for my lines. So in this case here, beforehand, I need to first initialize a counter, right? So I'll initialize a variable, let's call it count, because that's my output. And I'm starting off here, let's say I'm starting off with 0, okay? And so now, when I get a line inside of the loop, I then want to increment my counter. So I'll say my count is equal to my count plus 1. Cool. And so in this case here now, this is getting out my next line. So get out next line. And so now I have this function that's supposed to do what I think it's going to do. So let's test it. So let's save this. And so I'm going to call in my command window, I'm going to say count is equal to line count of song.txt. And so when I output this, notice here, it says that my count is 97, which matches what we can see here just by inspecting my code. And so in this case here, we use the blueprint to move through every single line in our file, okay? And then inside of our loop, we were incrementing a counter in order to figure out how many lines do we have. And that's it. So in this example, I now want to count the number of lines in a file that have an even number of characters. Okay, and so we're still dealing with this text file that is the lyrics to Bang Bang. And so I want to count how many of these lines have an even number of characters, including spaces and including punctuation, right? And so just looking at this, like, I won't know that right away, right? I would have to count the individual characters and stuff like that, but that would be a lot of work to do as a human. So let's get MATLAB to do it for us. And so first, I want to create this function header, right? So function, we're going to have this count. Let's call it EvenCount. And then we're going to call this LineCount even. It's going to take in a file. Okay. And so we're going to have the exact same blueprint that we had before. And we're first going to open our file. we're going to read our lines, all lines. Then we're going to close our file, close file. Okay. And so let us open this file with reading permission. So we're going to say fh is equal to fopen of file name. Let's just go ahead and close this as well. So fclose, fh. Awesome. And so now I want to read through every line of my file, right? And we've talked about the blueprint for this. So therefore, we are going to first start off by getting out our first line, so line. And then now we have to ask ourselves the question of, do we use fgetL or fgetS? And does it matter? And so I want to count the number of lines that have an even number of characters. So I care about the characters, like individual characters inside of my text file, right? So if I were to look at, let's say, this first line, the apostrophe bang bang, right? This case here, right? So this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, including the space, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, this has 11 characters in it, right? But there's also this \n on there, right? I can't see it, but we remember that it's there. And so depending on your computer, if you have a Mac, this might be length 1. If you have a PC, this might be length 2. And so right now, this is 11 characters. But if I include the \n on a Mac, right, that makes it 12. But I wouldn't want to count this line, right? I want this line to be included in my count because it doesn't have an even number of characters. And so in this case here, having the \n on there could cause problems. And so when we're reading through this file, we don't want to use fgetS. fgetS would cause issues in our function. We want to use fgetL because we don't want to have the \n on there when we're reading each individual line. So we're going to say fgetL, and we're going to say fgetL file handle. Cool. And then now while is char of my line, then I want to get out the next line at the bottom of this. So fgetL. Oops, I can't spell. fgetL of file handle. Cool. So I have that nice little blueprint. So now inside of here, I have a line. And now I want to ask myself, are there an even number of characters in this line? Okay. This is including punctuation and spaces and all that stuff, right? But so now this doesn't have the \n. So this won't have \n, which is good. Okay. And so now I want to ask myself, if the length of my line, right, if the mod of this, if it's even, so the mod of the length of my line in 2 is 0, if it's even, so if length is even, then I want to increment a counter, okay? So then I would say count, count is equal to count plus 1, okay? Beforehand, though, I have to initialize this counter, okay? So outside of here, I will then say my count is equal to 0. Awesome. And then so if its length is even, it's going to go through, count it. If it's not going to increment my counter, and it's just going to move on to my next line. And so let's go ahead and test this. So let's save this. LineCount even. Awesome. Oh, let's suppress that. And so if I say EvenCount, I don't care, LineCount even of song.txt. Oh my gosh, in this case here, I called my output EvenCount. So let's go ahead and do EvenCount. Let's call this EvenCount. Cool. All right, let's try this again. Cool. Now it says that I have 54 lines that have an even number of characters. This is not the same as the total 97 that I have. Okay, so about like half, right? A little more than half, right? Has an even number of lines, which is pretty cool. And so that's it. So we use the blueprint here to now we're moving through every single line in our file, but we're looking at individual characters. So this introduced us to the notion of first figuring out, is it important if I use fgetL or fgetS, right? You want to use fgetL, right, if you are caring about individual characters and you don't want the new line character to influence something like that. If you don't care, right, then fgetS might be the way to go. And that's it. All right, so in this example, what we're going to do is we're going to write a function called Revlines that takes in a string that contains the name of a text file. Okay, and we're going to want to create a new text file from the original one. However, every single line in the original file that had an even number of characters, we want that to be flipped. We want it to be reversed. And so this new file that we create should be named similarly to the old one, right? It should be the old file name, but with underscore reversed appended to it. And so let's think about how we're going to do this. So let me expand this some. And so first off, let's go ahead and create a function header, okay? And so the purpose of this function is it is going to create a new text file, okay? It's not actually outputting anything. It's not outputting a value of some sort. It's creating a new text file. So this is going to be a function that has some sort of input, but actually no output. It's just going to create something. So we're going to say function. We're not going to have an output here. We're going to call this Revlines, and it's going to take in a file name. Okay? And what this is going to do, once again, is output a new text file. Okay? And so let's think about what I need to do here. Okay? So I'm going to have to be reading through my original text file. Okay? Getting out a line, asking myself, is this an even number of characters? If it is, reverse it, then print it to a new file. Okay? If it's not, keep it the same, but also print that out to the new file. Okay? And so we're modifying the old file and then creating a new one. And so what are our steps here? So first off, we want to open our files. Okay? In this case here, first, let's open the file that I want to read from. Okay? And so in this case here, I want to say fh is fopen file name. Okay? So this is reading. And then now, if I want to create a new file, right, I have to open that new file, but with writing permissions. Okay, so fhw, fopen, and I'm going to call it new file name, but now it's going to have writing permissions. This is writing. But beforehand, I have to create this new file name. And so the problem says it should be your original file with underscore reversed appended to it. And so your original file name will be something like here, like song.txt. And so in this case here, there's multiple ways I can do this. I can either try to take this file name and stir toke it with a period to separate the two, okay? But if I'm guaranteeing that my file name always will end with .txt, I can just index this string, okay? So my new file name will be my old file name, so file name, starting from the beginning, until the end minus 1, 2, 3, 4, right? To the end minus 4. That'll get everything before the .txt. Then I want to append onto that, reversed, and then I can just go ahead and put .txt here. Cool. So I'm creating that new file name. Awesome. And then now I'm opening it with writing permissions. All right, so that's the first step, opening my files. And then now I want to read through every single line in my file that I have open with reading permissions, and then print to a new file, okay? And so it's still going to be the same basic blueprint that we did before. So we're going to get out a line, so we're going to say line is fget, and now in this case here, I need to ask myself, do I want to use fgetl or fgetS, right? In this case here, I want to figure out if the line has an even number of characters. So it depends. So it'll change if it has a \n or not. And so in this case here, I want to use fgetl to not have that \n there in order to accurately count the number of characters in my line. So I'm going to say fgetl of fh, okay? And now while is char of line, okay? Then I want to do stuff to my lines, okay? So now I have my line, and I want to ask myself, does it have an even number of characters? So same thing that we did before. So if the mod of the length of my line n2 is 0, so if even length, then I want to reverse this, right? I want to say my line is actually my line from end -1 to 1. Cool. So I've reversed my line. Reverse line, reverse line. So if not, then I don't want to do anything, okay? So at this point in time, I will either have a line that's the same as it was before, or one that's reversed. And so now in this case here, now I want to take that line that's either been reversed or not and print it to my new file. And so we can say fprintf fhw, and let's go ahead and just do like %s, and I'm going to put my line in there. Okay, it's going to put that entire line and print it to the new file. So once I'm done with that, now I want to get out my next line. So then I will say my line is equal to f get L of file handle. All right, and so then let's go ahead and erase that. Boom, boom. And then now let's close our files, right? And so I have multiple files open, so I have to do separate closes. So fclose of fh, and then fclose of fhw, okay? And so now I've written this code, and I can save this, and I am a coding genius now. And so the next thing I want to do is I want to test it, okay? And so in this case here, let's go ahead and call, what is this called? Revlines and song.txt. Okay? And so once again, I have no output, but if we look over here on the left-hand side, when I run this, then, oh my gosh, I get a new file here, song_reverse.txt. So now I can open this and see how amazing I am. And oh my gosh, it seems as if everything is on the same line. Why could that have happened, right? So I did this on purpose as a teaching moment. But in this case here, since we're using f get L, right, we don't have the new line character on there. So when I'm printing to my new file, this does not have the \n. This line does not have the \n. So therefore, what I want to do is I want to put a \n when I'm printing, because I took it off when I was reading it, okay? And so now, if I were to rerun this, okay, and if I were to open, okay, in this case here, now every single line that had an even number will be reversed, okay? And so this was the original one, yeah. And then, let's see if I go up to the top here. Yep. And then now, this is it reversed. Every line that had an even number of characters. All right, and so I think that's it. And so once again, we just have to be a little bit more mindful of the fact that since I'm using fgetL, this does not include the \n. So when I'm writing to this new file, I need to include that \n on it. But one thing to note here, right, is that my new line, or my new file, will have an extra new line, okay? Notice here there's 98 lines. In my original file, there was 97 lines, okay? For the most part in this class, this doesn't matter. We will say that it's okay for you to have an extra new line at the end, so you don't have to account for this, okay? And so I'm not even going to talk about how to account for it. But there are different ways, and I'll leave it up to you actually, to try to figure it out on your own. If I didn't want to include a \n on this next, or on my last line, how would I go about doing that? There's lots of different ways, but for the purpose of this class, it's really not that important, so I'm not going to waste time in order to talk about it. And so that's it. Okay, so in this example, we want to create a function called word_count that takes in the name of a file and also a word. And I want to output the number of times that that word shows up in the file. And this needs to be case insensitive. But now the thing about this example is I want to include words, or I want to include in my count instances where my word is a part of another word. Okay, and so what I mean by this is, so let's look at an example. So right now I have a text file that includes the entire script of the Bee Movie in all of its glory. Okay, and so I want to count, let's say in this case here, the number of times the word bee shows up, right? So it shows up here, okay? So I would want to count something like that. Also, notice here, it shows up bee with a comma after it. I should count that. In this case here, bees, I should also count that, right? So B is inside of that. If I go down some more, let's see. Oh, like something like B-min, right? B should also be counted in this case here, okay? So anytime the word shows up inside of another word, I want to count it. And And so let's figure out how to do that. So let's create our function header. I'm going to have some sort of count, and we're going to call this word count. I'm going to take in a file. Okay. And so the process is still going to be the same, where it's like I want to read through every line in my file. Okay. And so when I get out a line, though, we can use, like, we want to find all the instances of a certain word inside of a string. And we know that there's a function stir-find in order to help us do that. So therefore, our process is still going to be the same. We're going to open our file. So we're going to say fh is equal to fopen of file name. Let's go ahead and close this as well. I tend to forget to do that. Let's say close. Oh, why is that cap? Close file. So f close of fh. Cool. And so now I want to read through every single line. So read through all lines. And so I want to first get out my first line, and then I have to ask myself, do I want to use fgetL or fgetS, or does it matter? So I had already talked about, we're going to get out a line, and then we're going to use stir-find in order to find where that certain word, oh, this isn't just file name, it's file name and word, okay? Where that certain word shows up in my line, okay? And it can be a component of another one. And so if I have \n on the end, that's okay. That's actually okay, because let's go back to the, where is that example where like B, oh, and this one here, B is the last line or the last word on the line, right? So technically there is a \n. But when I use stir-find here, it's still going to find this B, even if it has a \n appended to it. So in this case here, it actually doesn't matter if I use fgetL or fgetS. So I'm just going to use fgetL. So fgetL file handle. And then while is char of my line, cool. Now I want to go through here and I want to ask myself, I want to count number of occurrences. Is that how you spell occurrences? Let's hope so. And so in this case here, I have this line, so I want to use stir-find. Okay, and so if we remember, stir-find takes in a string, right, and it takes in a pattern. So in this case here, we're going to take in our line, and then what we're looking for is the word. And what stir-find outputs is a list of indices, right? A vector of indices of all the times that this shows up, okay? And so in this case here, I would say my count, not my count, so my indices will be the output of the stir-find, okay? And if I want to figure out how many times this line this word shows up on this line, so let's call it occurrences, this will be the length of my indices, okay? So that's the occurrences for this individual line, okay? And so then now I want to create a global counter though, right? Where every time I want to figure out how many times does this word show up in my entire file. So let's create a counter outside of here. Let's start it out at 0. And so when I get my occurrences, I then want to do my count is equal to my count plus my occurrences. So every time this will be updated with how many times that word showed up on that individual line. Okay. Then I want to get out my next line. So line is equal to fgetL of file handle. Cool. And so there's one thing that I'm missing here. Okay. My problem said I wanted this to be case insensitive. Okay. And so in this case here, I'm getting in some sort of word and I'm getting in some sort of line as well, right? But I want to make sure that these are the exact same case, right? And so I'm going to force them to both be lowercase. So I'm going to say the lower of my line and also the lower of my word. In this case here, this is ensuring that they're going to be the same case. So when I search through my line for that word, case doesn't matter. All right. And so I feel like this is correct. And so let's test it to make sure. I guess we won't actually know, but let's test it to make sure. What do I want to do? Count. So count is word count. In this case here, this is movie.txt, and I want to look for the word B. Do I have everything suppressed? Let's suppress this last one, just so nothing prints out. Okay. Oh, there's an error. What is this? Invalid fgetS. Fopen file name. Invalid. What is this saying? FgetL on line 16. file name. Oh, oh gosh, that's because I can't type. Okay, it tried to look for the text file called move.txt, which doesn't exist, so therefore opening it didn't work. So let's try this again, because typing is hard. Cool. And so in this case here, it says that my count is I have 173 instances of the word be, which is pretty cool. I wonder, is there a way that we can like check that? Can we look for, does it say like a number of count here? Nah, I don't have to go through each time. Let's assume that our code is absolutely perfect, right? And so we're going through every single line. We're using stir-find to find out all the indices of the occurrences of the word be in a line, and we're adding that to some global counter. Then we're moving on to the next line, and we're doing this over and over and over again, so we're getting some overall number of the occurrences of this particular word inside of our text file, where case doesn't matter. And this is pretty cool. And I could do this for like any text file, any word. Like, what if I wanted to know in this B movie, how many times, I don't know, oh, he says jazz in there. Jazz only shows up once in the instance of the movie. I guess when he says, do you like jazz? That one time. Cool. And so this is an example of reading through every single line in a text file in order to find the occurrences of words that could be components of substrings. Pretty easy, pretty cool.